Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Samech Amud Aleph, 60a of Maseches Kiddushin, and we are starting from 8 lines down the page. The first word on the line is Gita. In the middle of the line it says Ula Amar, Ula says. So we were discussing an interesting case at the end of last week's Amud, which was where a man goes over to a woman and says, Harat mikudeshes li me'achshav ula'achar lamed yom. He says, from now, after 30 days. And then another guy comes and says, from now, after 20 days. And another guy comes and says, from now, after 10 days. So the Gemara said that according to the opinion of Rav, that we're not sure how to look at such a statement. Is it a Tanai, a condition, that when the 30 days elapses, then you'll be mikudeshes from now? Or is it a retraction from now, actually in 30 days? So Rav wasn't sure, and the Gemara discussed what the halacha, would be in this case where there's 3 people. So now the Gemara says, Ula Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Ula says that Rabbi Yochanan says that in this case, Afilu Meya Tofsin Ba, that even 100 people who do this, the Kiddushin would take effect from each of them. Now that doesn't mean that she's permitted to all of them. She's actually forbidden to all of them, but there's seems like he's saying there's a certain quasi-Kiddushin that would take effect in each case. V'chein Amar Rav Asi Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Asi said this in the name of Rabbi Yochanan as well. Afilu Meya Tofsin Ba. Even if 100 people do this, so one person says, from now until after 100 days. Another person says from now until after 99 days. And so on, 98, 97. Even if 100 people do this, they all Kiddushins take effect. She's mikudeshes to all of them. She would need a get from every single one. And it sounds very strange. The Gemara says, Amar le Rav Masharshia, breder of Ami Rav Asi. Rav Masharshia, the son of Rav Ami, said to Rav Asi, Asber alach taimad Rabbi Yochanan. I'll explain to you the reasoning behind Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. Shavu nafshayu ki sharga de livni. They've made themselves like the bricks of a building. De kol chad v'chad ravcha lechavrei shavak. Each one has left room for his friend. In other words, when we build a building with bricks, so we don't stack them one on top of the other, but rather you spread them out, and each one leaves a space for the next one. Meaning you leave like half the brick so if you have one brick, so then the next brick on top only covers half of that brick, another brick will cover the other half, and so on, each layer. So each brick on each layer only covers half the brick, half of 2 bricks, but half a brick of the lower layer, the idea being that it leaves something over each time. And so what they're saying for Rabbi Yochanan is that over here, there's each person here, one person says from now in 100 days. So the Kiddushin is starting to take effect, but it's not yet finished until those 100 days elapse. So it's kind of hanging there in the balance. So Rabbi Yochanan holds that when you have a Kiddushin that's hanging in the balance, so it's possible for another Kiddushin, since it's not a full Kiddushin, another Kiddushin could take effect on top of it. Had it been a full Kiddushin, and she's completely betrothed to this person, then she can't be betrothed to 2 people at the same time. But because it's not a full Kiddushin, because it's still hanging in the balance, it's incomplete still until the condition is met, until the 100 days pass. So then it's like a quasi-Kiddushin, and it's not a full Kiddushin. And therefore, Rabbi Yochanan holds there's room for another Kiddushin to take effect. Now again, it won't mean that she's permitted to both men and that she could, spend one night with one man, another night with the other man. Actually, she's forbidden to all of them. But it means that she would, because there's some degree of Kiddushin, so she would need a get from every single one of these men. Okay, so that's the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara asks a contradiction. Masiv Rav Chanina. Rav Chanina asked a contradiction on this. So if a person, we have I think it's a Mishnah in Gittin, or actually maybe a Brisa. The Brisa says if a person gives a get, we discussed it in the last week's Amud. Misa. If a person gives a get and he says it should be from now and after I die. So we said get ve'eno get. It's a get, it's not a get, meaning it's a suffix, it's in doubt what the status of this get is. However, ve'imes choletzes v'lo misyabemes. If he dies, so in the meanwhile, but he says, he gives the get, he says it should be a get, this is from today and after I die. And then he dies. So the Mishnah says, or the Brisa says, choletzes v'lo misyabemes. So she has to do, if he died without any children, so she would technically fall to Yibum, it seems, to one of his brothers. Because if a man dies without children, the wife falls to Yibum. So if there were no children here, she would fall to Yibum. But we say, no, a brother can't do Yibum here, he can't marry her. We have to do Chalitza. So why? So the Gemara says, Bishlam al Rav. So it makes sense according to Rav. Misayele. This is a proof to Rav, meaning this is the opinion that Rav goes with. Remember, Rav looks at these types of scenarios where you say from now and after 30 days or something like that, or after I die. It's a suffix. We don't know how to look at that. Do we look at it as a tanai, or do we look at it as a condition, or do we look at it as a retraction? Now, in this case, so this man gives a woman a get, and he uses this language, which we're in doubt what it is. Now, if it's a condition, then when he dies, it means there was a get. It means she was divorced. If she was divorced, then she doesn't fall to Yibum. So that's why she can't do Yibum. She can't marry the brother. She would be forbidden to the brother if it was really a get. On the other hand, if it was a retraction, so then what he was saying was that it should be a get from now. Actually, it should be a get after I die. Well, you can't give a get after you die. So in that case, it was never a get. In which case, she would have to do Yibum or Chalitza. Well, Yibum is not an option because it might be forbidden to do Yibum because maybe it was really a get. So that's why we require Chalitza. So that's the opinion of the Chachamim, and that's what Rav went with. Rav was was consistent with the opinion of the Chachamim from Rav from last week's Gemara. Now, the Gemara says, for Shmuel it's also good. The Gemara says that Shmuel, who argued on Rav last week, and Shmuel held that no, it's for sure a tonight, it's for sure a condition. So there is. It says Shmuel Nami. Shmuel also, it's not a question on him. Hamani, he would say, who's this going like? This Mishnah. Rabbanani. It goes like the Rabbanim. Vanada Amri Rebbe. But I hold like Rebbe, like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So in last week's Amud we saw that there was actually a machlokas that we can understand this brisa to be the machlokas, the dispute between the Chachamim and Rebbe about whether we, according to the Chachamim, we are uncertain about this language. Is it a tanai? Is it a condition? Or is it a retraction? And Rav actually held like that. Shmuel held that no, we're certain, but there was another opinion in that brisa, which was the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says that actually we know for sure that it's a get. It's not a retraction. It's a condition. Shmuel holds like that. But this opinion being expressed here, he'll say that's the Chachamim. I don't hold like them, but that's not a question on me. That's the Chachamim. Elo Rabbi Yochanan de Amar Shiura Have. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, who has just a different perspective on this whole thing, it's not about is it a tanai or is it a condition, is it a retraction. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it's neither. It's a condition that leaves over what they call here shiura. There's remnants. So meaning you leave an opening. That's really what it is. You have a quasi Kiddushin that leaves an opening. So if that's the case, so we should look at the get that way too. Just like Rabbi Yochanan saying, if I give a Kiddushin and I say from now until after 30 days, or from now and after 30 days. So Rabbi Yochanan says what that does is it's a half Kiddushin, but it leaves like half the brick open, right? It leaves space for another person to come in and give her Kiddushin too. That's how he looked at the Kiddushin. So if that's the case, so you should look at that by get also. If he gives a get and says from now and after 30 days, or from now after I die, which is what the case is over here, so that should be a get that leaves some opening. It's a quasi-get. And if that's the case, Kol gita d'meshayir ba v'lo klumo. If a get that's not a full get is nothing. A get has to be creases. It has to be that it separates, that it cuts them off from each other. So if it's only a quasi-get, then that's nothing. So if that's the case, Yevumi miyavim. She should be able to do yibum. The brother should be able to be miyavim her. Because there's no doubt here that there's no get. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the way that we look at this type of language is we look at it as shiura, you're leaving an opening. Well, if you leave an opening, if you give only a quasi-get, and you leave an opening, so it's not a get. If it's not a get, then that means that she's widowed from her husband, and she should fall to yibum. So why would we say the brother has to do chalitza and he can't do yibum? He should be able to do yibum. So Amar Rava, Rava says, no, it does work. Get lahotzi umisa lahotzi. A get takes her out of the domain of her husband. That's what it does. It removes her from the domain of her husband. Misa lahotzi. Also, the husband's death takes her out of the domain of her husband. So mashashir get gamraso misa. Says Rava that it was a quasi-get, but it's a quasi-get until he dies. But since his death also removes her from his domain, so actually his death has the ability to complete that get. I guess had it been a case where he said from now and after 30 days, so there, if the 30 days, maybe that's maybe more complicated. Fine, let's leave that for aside for now. But if he, in this case, so Rabba's saying interesting idea that a get removes her from the domain of her husband, and so does his death. And so his death has the ability to fill in that blank, to complete that get, which was up till now was a quasi-get. But with his death, it can now be considered a complete get. And if that's the case, then she can't do, they can't do yibum. And maybe we have a doubt about this, so we require chalitza. Amalei Abaye. Abaye said to me, Dami, can you compare his death to a get in terms of how it removes her from his domain? Get motzia mirshus yavam. If he divorces her, if her husband gives her a get, not only is he out of his domain, he's also out of his brother's domain. There's not going to be yibum. There's no yibum when they get divorced through a get. But misa mechansa l'rshus yavam. But his death actually brings him into the domain of the yavam, and brings her into the domain of the yavam. She becomes zakuk l'yibum. She becomes ready for yibum if her husband dies without children. So these are apples and oranges. Rava was trying to say that when he gives her a get on condition, and he says it's from now and after I die, that just like the get starts the process of taking her out of his domain, and his death completes that process, and finishes off the get, so to speak. But Abaye says, well, you can't really say that because it's true they both remove her from his domain, but in a very different way. A get removes her from his domain, and she does not go to the brother's domain. There's no yibum. While his death removes her from his domain, but then she ends up in his brother's domain. So it wouldn't make sense for that to complete the get in such a way that now she won't fall to yibum. His death makes her fall to yibum. So Abaye rejects this answer. So we're back to the question. The question is that we have a brisa that says, it's like if a man gives a get to a woman and says, this is your get from now and after I die, and then he dies, they can't do yibum. They have to do chalitza. And the question is, why can't they do yibum? The way Rabbi Yochanan looks at that case, such a case, these types of cases, is that you're mishayir, you're leaving a space open. So it's only quasi. So if you give a get and you say from now and after, so it's a quasi get, and a quasi get is not a get. If it's not a get, then she should be allowed to do yibum. They should be allowed to do yibum. Why does it say they have to do chalitza? That was the question. So Ela Amar Abaye, so rather Abaye says, Ha sometime amai, you know why we say to do chalitza not yibum? Gezerah mishum, it's a gezerah to cover ourselves, to make sure we don't get confused for the following case, where he says, Mehayom imesi. If he says, it will be a get from now if I die. So it's more of a condition, and there hareze a get. There it's for sure a get. As opposed to our case, where he said, this is a get from today and after 30 days, after I die, and after I die. So that's not, he's not making his debt, the get conditional on his death. He's in our case, he's saying it's from now and after I die, but it's not conditional on his death. In the case where it's conditional on his death, where he says from today if I die, so then it's conditional on his death, and certainly when he dies, it will take effect retroactively from the day that he gave it. So, and if that's the case, then in that case it is a good get, then yibum is not an option. So therefore, says Abaye, that's why, so we don't get confused between these two cases, that's why they said you always do chalitza. Because if we would say that they're so similar, if he says from now and after I die, if we would allow yibum then, somebody might think that if he said from now if I die, we should allow yibum too, and that's not the case. There it's certainly a get. So the Gemara asks, V'nigzer mehayom imesi ditachotz atu mehayom la'achar misa. So let's go the other way. So in the case where he says, the case that we were just discussing, where he made it conditional, he said from today and after, from today if I die, where it was conditional, where we say it is a get. And if it is a get, then we don't require yibum or chalitza if he dies without children because he divorced his wife. So in that case, we don't require either. So the Gemara is saying we should still require chalitza because you could get confused. If you say that in the case where he says, from today if I die, where he makes it a clear condition, if you say that there it's for sure a good get and therefore he doesn't need yibum or chalitza, so then you might think that in this other case, in our case, where he says from today and after I die, where it's not a condition, he says from today and after I die, that Rabbi Yochanan says it's hanging in the balance, it's quasi. So you might think that in that case as well, you don't need anything. But actually, we do need chalitza in that case. We do need chalitza because sorry, one second. Yeah, so in that case, we said you need chalitza, so as, again, to get our cases straight, the case where he says, where he makes it conditional, so in that case where he says, this is a get from today, if I die, so then when he dies, it's definitely a get, and you really don't need yibum or chalitza. And you don't. We don't require yibum or chalitza in that case. In the case where he says it should be a get from now and after I die, so that's this quasi-get, which is not a get. And really, if it's not a get, then there's for sure, if he dies without children, yibum and chalitza. We said you don't do yibum because you might get confused with the other case and think that you could do yibum in that other case. So we say don't do yibum here, just do chalitza. So now the Gemara is asking that you need chalitza, right? You need to do chalitza here. So in the other case, back to the case of where it is conditional, from today, if I die, we should require chalitza there. Because if we don't, you might get confused and think that in the other case, where you say from today and after I die, which we said is nothing, it's not a get at all, so, and you need chalitza there, you might come to think that you don't need chalitza. You might get confused. If you don't need chalitza when you say from today, when I die, then you might think that you don't need chalitza when you say from today and after I die. So, the Gemara says, yeah, but there's a different problem. If we would require chalitza, in our case, in the case where you say from today, if I die, in the conditional case, where it is a good get, so imata omer chaletzes, if you tell them that they should do chalitza, misyabemes, they might come to do yibum. And that would be a big problem, because really the get's a good get. They're really divorced, which means she does not fall to yibum. And if they would do yibum, that would be a big problem. If she would marry the brother, that's an iser karis. That's a serious offense. So, fine. So that's why we're concerned. If you tell them to do chalitza, they might come to do yibum. So the Gemara asks, so hachanami. In our case too, imata omer chaletzes misyabemes. In our case, where we're saying that when you say from today and after I die, which is a case where it's not a get, which means that she really does fall to yibum and chalitza. But we say don't do yibum, do chalitza, because if you do yibum, you might come to get confused with the other case where you can't do yibum. So why don't we say, how could you do chalitza? People might think that you could do yibum. So the Gemara says, the simple answer would seem to be, well, you gotta do something. She fell to yibum, so it's either yibum or chalitza. You can't just do nothing. But the Gemara says, Tisyabim, okay, so they'll do yibum. Ve'im b'kach klum, it's not a big deal. Chashasha d'Rabbanan, because it's only a rabbinic concern that if you do yibum here, you might think you could do yibum in the other case. But really, yibum is okay. So we're comfortable saying that they could do chalitza, they might, if you could do chalitza, you might think you could do yibum. Okay, it wouldn't be the end of the world if they did yibum, because really, the reason why we say not to do yibum in our case is just because you might confuse it with the other case and think you could do yibum when really you can't. But I think the underlying reason has to be that you need to do something. You need to do either yibum or chalitza in this case. Okay, that's a confusing Gemara. Let's move on to the next Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Ha'omer le'isha, a man says to a woman, Hareat mikudeshes li amenas she'eten lach masayim zuz. He says, you're mikudeshes to me on condition that I give you 200 zuz. So, the Mishnah says, Harezu mikudeshes. She's mikudeshes, v'hu yitein. And he gives it. Amenas she'eten lach mikan v'ad lamed yom. If he says, on condition that I give it to you from now until 30 days, so then he's got to do it within the 30 days. Nasan la b'soch shloshim mikudeshes. If he gives it to her within the 30 days, then the Kiddushin works. V'imlav, but if not, eina mikudeshes, then it's not a Kiddushin. If he says, Amanash yesh li masayim zuz, if he says, on condition that I have 200 zuz in my bank, harezu mikudeshes. She's mikudeshes v'yeshla, assuming that he has it. Amanashe erech masayim zuz. If he says on condition that I show you 200 zuz, and seemingly his 200 zuz, harez mikudeshes. That's a good kiddushin v'yirala. He just has to show it to her. V'imhera ala shulchan eina mikudeshes. But if he's a money changer or a money lender, and he shows it that, and he has other people's money on his table, and he shows her other people's money, that doesn't work. Because when he says, I'm going to show you 200 zuz, he means of my own money. So he's got to show her his own money. Okay, so this case of this case that the Mishnah started with, he says to a woman, "You're mikudeshes to me on condition that I give you 200 zuz." So the Mishnah said she's mikudeshes v'hu yiting. It's kiddushin and he has to give it. So the Gemara says itmar. Rav Huna amar v'hu yiting. Rav Huna says that he has to give it, meaning he can give it when he wants, and the kiddushin will take effect retroactively after he's given it. If he dies before giving it, it won't. But so it is conditional, but it works retroactively. So when the Mishnah says she's mikudeshes, it means she's mikudeshes from now, assuming he eventually gives it. And he's got his whole life; he's got plenty of time. But Rabbi Yehuda Amar, Rabbi Yehuda says likishayiting. So it sounds like he had a when it says v'hu yitain. He interpreted that to mean when it says, and he gives it, it means once he gives it, she'll be mikudeshes, but not retroactively. If a man says, you're mikudeshes to me on condition that I give you 200 zuz, and the Mishnah says she's mikudeshes as long as he gives it, Rav Yehuda says that means when he gives it, she's mikudeshes, but not now, and not retroactively. Rav Huna Amar v'hu yitain. Rav Huna says it's as long as she gives it, he gives it, so then retroactively, there's kiddushin tanahave. It's a tanai, it's a condition. Mekayim tana v'azil. He can fulfill the condition wherever. But as soon as he fulfills, any time, he has his whole life ahead of him to give her that 200 zuz. Then retroactively, the condition takes effect. The kiddushin was effective from the beginning. Rabbi Yehuda Amar, Rabbi Yehuda says, l'kishayiteng, once he gives it, l'kiyayev habu kiddushi. Once he gives it, it's kiddushin. Hashtam yalo abu kiddushi. But right now it's not. He doesn't view this as a condition that would retroactively take effect. My beinayu, what's the practical difference? Ika beinayu, a practical difference would be shepashta yada v'kibla kiddushin me'acher. What if, in the meanwhile, she stuck her hand, accepted kiddushin from someone else? Rav Huna lo abu kiddushi. According to Rav Huna, it's not kiddushin because there's a Tanai that says, there's a condition that says that retroactively she's mikudeshes to the first guy. Rabbi Yehuda havu kiddushi. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it is kiddushin. It is kiddushin. She's married to the second guy. Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, the first guy's kiddushin won't take effect until he actually gives her the money. By the way, I missed one important detail. This case, the case of the Mishnah is where he does give her something now. He gives her one pruta now, and it's on condition, and then the kiddushin is on condition that he later gives her more, or he says it's on condition. So the first opinion of the Gemara, which is Rav Huna says, if you say on condition, that works, it's on condition, and it will take effect retroactively. Rav Yehuda says no, the way that works is, when he gives it later, that's when it will take effect. Okay, the Gemara says, Utna nami gabi gittin ki agavna. We have the same type of discussion when it comes to gittin, when it comes to a bill of divorce. It says there, if a man says to a woman, here's your get, but it's on condition that you give me 200 zuz. The Mishnah says it's a divorce. Behi titing. And it says, and she gives it. So again, there we have this question, when it says it's a good get, and she gives it, do we mean once she gives it, it's a get retroactively, or do we mean once she gives it, it's a get now? So again, we have itmar, we have it instead, Rav Huna Amar, v'hi titing. Rav Huna says that she just has to give it at some point, but retroactively the get takes effect from when he gives it. Rabbi Yehuda Amar likishating. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it only takes effect once she gives the money. And again, the Gemara explains, Rav Huna Amar v'hi titing tanahave. Rav Huna holds that It's just once she gives it, because it's a tanai, it's a condition. Mekaima tana ve'azva. She can fulfill that condition whenever it's convenient for her. You know, if she remarries a rich guy, she gets money, but she has to just give the 200 zuz at some point, and that will mean that the get took effect retroactively. But Rav Yehuda Amar Likishatite. Rav Yehuda says it's only once she gives that money. Likishatite Likiyahivale hu dehave get. Hashtami get. Once she gives that money, then it's a get from that moment. But right now it is not a get. My beinayu, and what would be a practical difference? Ika beinayu sheniskara get osha avad. What if the get got torn up or got lost before she gave the money? So, Rav Huna have a get. According to Rav Huna, it's a good get, even though it got torn up, before she fulfilled the condition. But because once she fulfills the condition of giving the money, retroactively it was a get the whole time. Rav Yehuda lo have a get. According to Rav Yehuda, it's not a get because it only takes effect once she gives the money, and the get was gone by that time. It was lost or torn up, so therefore it can't take effect. Now Rashi points out for us that when we say here that the get, according to the Rav Huna, that the get is a good get as long as he eventually fulfills the condition, or she fulfills the condition, gives him the money. So in the meanwhile, she can't marry anyone else, because if it turns out that she never fulfills the condition, then that means that she remained married to the first guy the whole time. So she can't marry a different person in the meanwhile, meaning both opinions will agree that she can't marry another person in the meanwhile. Okay, so the next step of the Gemara will be to explain why we need to learn this dispute in the context of Kiddushin and Gittin. Why can't we just say it in one context and figure it out to the other context? Mirz Hashem, we'll do that next time.